Very pleased to have you at this panel, and it's my great honor to moderate it. I'm sure it's going to be a very interesting discussion since we have such a good combination of policymakers, both from the parliament but also from the government. And we have been discussing in the morning a lot about the benefits of the family-friendly policies that they have at all levels, at individual level, at family level, at society level. And the evidences are there, right? But when it comes to the implementation, I think we face a lot of realities on the ground in our societies. So I really want to invite our panelists today to reflect on this, to share the experience of your countries in designing, adopting, and implementing the gender-responsive family policies. We'll be discussing the reasons why these policies were important to be in these countries, and what are the benefits that you expect, or maybe you have already observed in your countries. But I would also like to invite you to share your future plans and commitments to further advance the gender-responsive family policies. So welcome everyone again, and I invite all of you to travel virtually through these 4 beautiful countries, and I'm sure you agree, 4 of them are really very beautiful. And let us land first in Kosovo. So Ms. Fatmire Kollçaku, who is the member of parliament in Kosovo, we've been discussing also yesterday during the networking event that there are a number of reforms that are underway in Kosovo, including the reform of social assistance scheme, the revision of early childhood education law to improve access to kindergartens, but also a big opportunity now there is with the labor law, right? So since the labor law is being developed, there is a great opportunity now to introduce the aspects of gender-responsive policies, especially around unpaid care work, parental leave, and work-life balance. So please tell us more about the expected changes and what kind of benefits do you envisage for women and men of Kosovo from having such policies in place? So over to you.
First, I want to thank you because I am very honored to be part of this very important conference and conversation, and highly appreciate the partnership developed with UNFPA over the years. This is my experience from my first mandate, 2004-2007, of Member of Parliament and Chair of Committee for Health, Labour and Social Welfare. We continue to cooperate with UNFPA, particularly because it encourages the public discussion on matters like and promote transformative policies. I'm currently part of governance that promotes social democratic values and already proven in commitment to gender equality by introducing several measures, like provision of scholarship for girls in deficit fields like information technology, support of women after childbirth and child allowance scheme, especially for women who are unemployment. This is the first time that we support also for maternity leave for women who are not in employment. It has plan in place for affordable housing for young couples just starting families, as well for increasing the number of public child care centers and centers based in community basis, also with public child care center, also in community basis. The efforts are being made in strengthening of the justice system, especially. We now are in process of big reform in justice system to better respond towards gender-based violence against girls and women. As a result of law of gender equality, the number of women in the parliament is the highest than ever, and Kosovo has a second female president, as you know. Still, gender inequality continues to be witnessed throughout Kosovo. As a member of parliament, it's my role especially to monitor the implementation of legislation, initiating new laws and amend the existing laws to respond to new realities. In this sense, pursuant to stabilization and association agreement, Kosovo is committed to obligate to harmonize in legislation to that of the European Union. According to the government legislative agenda, several basic laws are currently being reviewed. Law of labor included, law of sexual and reproductive health, civil code, family law, law for social and family services, as you mentioned, the big reform also in education system. But with only in one on seven workers are women employed, Kosovo has the lowest rate of women engaged in the labor market, and also 30% more women graduate from university compared to men, but only 15% of working are women are employed compared to 46% of men. This is both a result of patriarchal gender norms placing women as primary caregiver for children, old persons, sick family members, or family members with disabilities. And legal provisions currently obligating the employers to pay 70% of the employee's salary for the 6 months. In addition, they need to train and hire people to fill the position for up 12 months. With disagrees many private companies to hire women. I'm hoping that the new labor law, as you asked me, will be aligned, and we are working in this process, will be aligned or at least approximated with the European Union directive on work-life balance, and will include paternity and carers leave in addition to maternity leave, and all three measures supported by the public budget. In addition, I think that the law should also include provision for remote and flexible working arrangement and work modalities to have emerged during the pandemic. I expect that such measures will contribute towards increasing women's labor force participation by decreasing barriers for their employment, women having a choice over what kind of job they want, full-time, part-time, flexible, or remote, so that they can combine between their paid work and unpaid care work responsibilities. Empowerment of women to plan both their careers and family, rather than to choose one over the other. Improving the economic well-being of women and possibility of person around her. Reducing the gender pay gap, reducing poverty by getting more jobs, the chances of women's representation in leadership position are higher, thus bringing female voices in important decision. Having women in the leadership and decision-making position create models for young girls to believe that women are capable of achieving as much as men. Decreasing in violence against women as a result of decreased inequality. Increasing older women economic security. Indeed, I believe that gender-responsible family policies are an important instrument for women empowerment and beyond. They support the empowerment of children, men, families, and societies in general. And it promoted strongly and implemented properly by the government and private sector, we will reap the benefits in the long run. This is for the beginning of my speech.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Indeed, thank you for sharing the complexity of the reforms that you are undergoing and you envisage to implement. And it was interesting to hear the fact that this challenge, when we have the number of girls and boys in the education who are graduating, and then this is being reversed in the employment. I think this is very similar to many other countries in the region. So I think this is also that we could look more in depth. And thank you for sharing the commitment to harmonize the national legislation with the EU directives. I think this is very important to move forward towards gender equality, human rights, and support the gender-responsive family policies. Thank you very much. I'd like us now to travel to the next country, which is my dear country, Moldova. And I'd like to welcome again Marina Morozova, who is the Member of Parliament of the Republic of Moldova. We heard this morning from the Minister of Social Protection of Moldova that we have strong evidence in Moldova through a recent big national survey called Gender and Generation Survey that says that Moldovan population, they want to have 3 and more children, but actually decide to have 1 or 2, and the fertility rates are very low. And of course, there are a lot of barriers that prevent them from their reproductive aspirations. But recently, there have been so many changes in legislation in Moldova to support families. And to name just a few, the shorter childcare leave, but better paid, possibility to share the childcare leave between fathers and mothers, but also flexible working arrangements that have been introduced into the labor court. And I think this last one also comes as an alignment with the European Directive on work-life balance, which call upon all the countries to align their legislation and to offer women and men opportunity to balance their time that they spend in paid and unpaid care work. So we would like to hear what kind of outcomes do you expect from the, as a result of the recently approved legislation? And how do you think this will contribute to the desired fertility of families and couples in Moldova? Over to you.
Thank you, Natalia. Dear audience, I'm very pleased to be here, and thank you for organizing this event. Actually, it is a great moment for all stakeholders to be on one floor and to discuss about experience and issues that we have still to change in our countries. Thank you a lot. And indeed, in Republic of Moldova, we had a very productive year. Last year, I may say, we had a lot of changes in the law for friendly family policies, and I'd like to also to thank our colleagues and partners, UNFPA and Natalia, Nelly, that came every day actually in the parliament, in the government, to help us with researches, to promote family-friendly policies, and now to implement these policies actually, because we want to move forward to implement them on the highest level and to have result. So Moldova has the highest prevalence of inactivity among women and in the region, and one of the lowest employment rates of women. National Bureau of Statistics shows that the employment rate of women with at least one preschool child is 20% lower than of those with no preschool children. So this is a significant difference in the European region. The share of young women neither in employment nor in education or training was among the highest in the region. It is about 24%. And among the main factors contributing to high female inactivity are family responsibilities, poor available childcare, and low employment opportunities in a rural area. Also, the family tradition, we don't forget about this. So household and family care are likely barriers to labor force participation, especially for women and who take unpaid caregiving responsibilities. we, as state, we came with a lot of changes in law and to support families, to support parents, and to support actually women, because data provided by Generation and Gender Survey 2020 show that more than a half of Moldovans believe that there should be at least 3 children in the family, as Natalia mentioned, but the real situation is 2 or 1. I am mother of 3, and I know that I want to be an example for our citizens and for women, to encourage them to be more active, to have the desired number of children that they want to have, but also be engaged in their labor market and to be active for their countries. So. As our Ministry of Labor mentioned in the morning, we have a lot of changes in law, and I'm proud to say now that beginning of September 1st, many of these laws came into force, and I will mention now the most important. We introduced a new option for leave and childcare allowance, shorter period of 12 months, and with higher allowance, 90% of the salary. Until now, we had 2 options. It was 3 years with an allowance with 30% of from the salary, or 2 years with allowance of 60% for first year and 30% for second year. We hope that with this change, many of parents will take a shorter period and will have higher allowance and will be able to come back to their work and to be supported by state, to have child care services, and also we are working on NANSI regulament rules, because till now it is like on air. So yeah, we are working on this. As of September 1, parents can share child care leave. We believe that it is very, very important that both parents can participate equally in raising children, and those who ensure that the legal possibility that children live and the allowance be shared between parents. So if the mother wants to stay with her child 6 months, she will be able to do this. After 6 months, the father can take the rest of leave, and also to be paid based on his salary. So now, from September, we are free to do this. Because we encourage fathers to participate in childcare, we have additional to maternity leave, we have paternity leave. It is 14 days, and till now it was, you could take this paternity leave during 56 days after the birth of the child. Now we prolong this period, because not all fathers could take this period in the first 56 days. So now the fathers can take parental leave, additional to maternity leave, in the period of 12 months. So, also, we regulated in the labor code the flexible work schedule, which will help parents to negotiate with employers a schedule adapted to the needs of the family. And the most important, and I want to share our good experience also already here, you will see later. We have changed legislation to encourage the opening of alternative child care services in the workplace. Employers will be able to create nurses services within companies, and parents can come with their babies at work. And we have here representatives of the companies that already have these rooms for baby inside their company. You will see our successful story this afternoon. So I think all these changes in law and that will come more will help parents to have the number of children that they want. And I also want to believe that only when there is true equality between men and women can families really flourishing and allow all families members to fulfill their potential and advance societies in a prosperous future. So as I mentioned, all the changes in law, all policies that we have. We had good collaboration with partners of development, and we are still working for more. And I hope to take today our good experience and successful stories in Moldova. Actually, I want to mention that friendly family policies is a topic of women in politics, and we are so lucky to have first president as women, a tandem of prime minister women, and 40% of women in the parliament. So all these family policies are also because we are women in politics, and we have big support from our men in the government. So thank you, and I look forward to discuss more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There is very, very interesting and inspiring, and there are so many, indeed, recent legal changes that support the families with children specifically, but not only, to reconcile the work and life balance. And we are really looking forward to see their implementation and the long-term benefits. But also thank you for sharing your personal experience as a mother of three. And if I may share, I know that your youngest kid was only 5 days, right, when you were in the parliament, back to the parliament. So thank you for being both active and also, you know, balance, as an example, to balance the work, the career, and the family. Thank you so much.
If I may add here, Natalia.
Sure.
Madam Enemy, thank you a lot for your advice. I will come back to my family and put on the table and discuss about home responsibilities, because they must be in charge of what we are doing as women and also as parents. Thank you.
Exactly. That's a very practical advice of the policies that we can start implementing in our own families. Thank you so much. So now traveling to beautiful Georgia, right? Tamila Barkalaia, the Deputy Minister of Labor, Health and Social Affairs of Georgia. We had a very nice conversation yesterday evening to learn about the challenges, but also the progress that Georgia is making. But back in 2016, Georgia adopted the demographic policy, right? A very strategic document that is based on the principle of human rights and international law, but also the Sustainable Development Goals. And one of the key priorities of this policy was to support the responsible parenthood. And as a result, we learned that Georgia introduced amendments to the labor code, including increased ceiling on paid maternity leave, and also possibility to fathers to use parental leave. And although leave for fathers is such a relatively new concept in Georgia, but also in the region, we were discussing yesterday about the norms and stereotypes. But the recent research in Georgia showed that nearly 2 in 3 Georgian men and women actually support the idea of shared parental leave. So this really proves the immense impact that the legislation can have on the attitudes and practices of the society. So considering so good progress already in Georgia, what is the vision of your minister that you represent, that is in charge of the social policies, to further expand the gender-responsive policies in Georgia? Please, over to you.
Thank you, Natalia. First and foremost, I would like to thank UNFPA for giving me this opportunity today. It is a pleasure and an honor to share some of the best practices that Georgia has, but also to learn. And this morning's session was very informative. I would like to thank the participants, the panel members, because I really had the opportunity to hear some of innovations that potentially can benefit Georgia very much. Before going into the progress and giving you information about Georgian progress, I would like to give you a little bit of historical background of Georgia, where we come from, and why are we here, where we are at the moment. And I promise I will try not to take a lot of time. In early 2000s, to boost investment into the country, Georgia took on a very libertarian approach and deregulated majority of labor legislation and economic legislations, which for about a decade, which in turn did increase investment. However, the investment and the benefit and GDP growth of the country did not necessarily trickle down to the population most in need and population that is most vulnerable. And majority of this population is women, youth, children, people with disabilities, elderly, that proved very clear that need additional support from government and from state in order to be able to participate in the society, to participate in labor market, and to be able to self-realize, or to have the possibility of self-realization in the labor market and be economically sustainable. Hence, over the last decade, we've been re-establishing the social state. Georgia is a social state, starting from constitutional changes, where we clearly identify that Georgia is a social state, following with the legislative changes and amendments to the legislation, starting with labor code, and there were several amendments over the past decade into the labor code, starting from 2013, the latest one being in 2020, where all those amendments that you, Natalia, have mentioned have been reintroduced into Georgian legislation. And this process was very participatory. We had very good participation and active collaboration with stakeholders, with social partners, with employers' representatives, with employees' representatives. We really encouraged tripartite social dialogue and their involvement into labor code elaboration processes. And of course, our ministry and government very closely worked with the Parliament of Georgia, which played a significant role in pushing and advocating for those changes that were very recently introduced in 2020. And some of the major changes that you've listed are there, such as improved maternity and parental leave protections and enabling fathers to be able to take parental leave for the purpose of care for the child. We also introduced the concept of equal pay for equal work. We also introduced or improved harassment, including sexual harassment clauses in labor legislation. And one of the most important changes that we introduced in labor code is to ensure and establishment of oversight mechanisms such as labor inspection. Because part of the reason of, or part of the challenge of the previous clauses of labor legislation was that the legislation was in place with lower standards, but it was in place. But because there was no oversight or monitoring mechanism in place, there was no labor inspection in place, there was no way of ensuring that legislative norms are actually implemented. Hence, we re-established labor inspection. It's a new mechanism that is operating as an independent entity under our ministry as of 2021, January. And we are still in the process of building the capacity of labor inspectors. We have enormous support from EU in the process and our US partners in the process, and we're really sharing these best practices. And UN agencies play a very important role, UNFPA and UN Women, where the methodologies that are currently developed within labor legislation really keep some of best practices in mind, where we have recently adopted an inspection mechanism to identify the value for equal work at workplaces, for labor inspectors to be able to identify the wage gap at the workplaces. And this methodology is targeted not only for labor inspectors, but also it's targeted towards employers. And in fact, again, with UN support, we are working with employers' associations to ensure that this methodology is accessible to employers so that they can identify the problems at the workplaces themselves, and they are involved in this process. And it's very important that the lesson learned for us is that unless the process is participatory, unless employers and employees themselves are involved, informed, well-informed, and involved in the processes, the government will not be able to, make those changes alone. Hence, our ministry, the Labor Inspection Office, is very closely working with associations, employer associations. We are very closely working with unions, professional unions, to ensure that, at one hand, employees are well informed about their rights. They are well informed about legislative changes and about the systems that are in place for their protection, and they can request those protections. But at the same time, employers who in many cases are not informed about possibilities and about their responsibilities are also well informed about the legislative changes and their responsibilities. In addition, I don't want to spend a lot of time about, talking about labor inspection, but we really consider it as one of the most important tools to actually ensure that the labor legislation and those changes that were implemented will actually trickle down to the population for whom the legislation was implemented and in place. Regarding maternity protections, yes, we did introduce changes enabling fathers to take parental leave. However, we do have a long way to go before we can actually try to present it as a best practice to you, because we are still working and continuing to work with UN agencies, with UNFPA and UN Women to introduce improved maternity protections for women, and explicitly introduce paternity leave in our labor legislation. This is an ongoing process. Parliament is involved. UN agencies are involved. Again, it's a very participatory process together with our social partners and NGO sector. And we're hoping that very soon we will be able to present this to the Parliament for the approval. Meanwhile, we are working very closely with non-government organizations, UN agencies, to ensure that other sectors of family-friendly initiatives are developing and developing well. One of the best examples is a so-called child code that has been adopted by Georgian Parliament with support of UNICEF. It was developed by the government and Parliament jointly, where we really put children as the priority. And we really clearly identified government, including central government and local government's responsibilities for child protection and prevention of violence against children, and empowerment of families, including economic empowerment of families for the well-being of children. And this code is considered as one of the best legislative mechanisms for child well-being and child protection. And we are currently working with local governments and local municipalities to ensure that child protection system is empowered to really focus on prevention, because we are currently mostly focusing on response. And we are now working to improve identification of the need and prevention component a lot more, with support of local municipalities, or with particular, focus on prevention by local municipalities on local level, and empowering local municipalities and decentralizing many of our prevention-focused activities for the well-being of children, which include family empowerment, including economic empowerment of families. And yes, it's a work in progress. I mean, we do have a social workers legislation that is in addition to the child code, and we do consider social workers and as primary so-called drive force for timely identification and prevention, and work on family empowerment. And social workers are currently one of the most demanded profession in Georgia. I can tell you that it really created a lot of demand for social work on local level, which we're very happy about. And in addition to that, we do have central mechanisms in place, such as targeted social assistance, which is a household-focused biggest cash remittance and social assistance mechanism, which evaluates the vulnerability of the household, and the way it is developed is we see households with children and their needs the best. Hence, the target is predominantly for the families, to empower them economically and to support them economically through cash remittances. And in addition to the standard remittances, we do have a child benefit, a cash benefit for children, and the cash benefit for children is accessible for children that are residing in vulnerable families. And there is, vulnerability score, and based on vulnerability score, the lower is the score, the poorer the family, the larger the remittance. However, when it comes to children, the score that is eligible for child benefits is twice as high as the one that is eligible for general social benefits. So we're really targeting children in this case. When it comes to ensuring women's participation in labor force, again, active labor market as the part of deregulation, there was a decade of government's zero involvement in active labor market measures. So since 2015, we started to reintroduce step by step active labor market measures, and we re-established public employment services in January 2020, and that's when we actually started a big initiative with active labor market measures that are specifically targeting those that are, that have been out of job and economically inactive for longest time. Majority, and with a specific focus on women, and specific focus on youth, so-called NEET youth, not in training and in education, which is also very high in Georgia. And there is a specific and special programs that are also offered to people with disabilities. And in finalization of this, I would like to highlight that while we've been developing these legislations and legislative changes, to keep in mind the life cycle approach, we've recently, approximately a year and a half ago, introduced a new initiative, where we've evaluated, we did a holistic evaluation together with support of our partners, UN agencies, ILO was part of it, French Development Agency and EU also part of the process, where we evaluated our social protection systems based on the life cycle and protections that we have during the lifespan. And we identified that while we are, targeting most vulnerable and poor, we are targeting elderly because we do have a universal social pension for women and men. Our most unprotected part of population is the work-able population from the age 35 to 50 to up until pension age, because we don't have unemployment benefits in place, we don't have social security mechanism as such, we do have social protection. Hence, and active labor market measures are not sufficient in order to protect the work-able populations who need to generate income and who need to participate in labor force. Hence, with support of our, again, international partners, and the EU is a big supporter of the process, we started the process of elaboration of social code of Georgia, which basically consists of, and the process is just as important as the end result of the process, which will be the legislation, the social code. And the process is basically, there are different working groups currently that are working in numerous sectors that have been identified as the gaps. And those sectors are social security system, housing, child services, care services, and decentralization. And these are the sectors that we are working together with the stakeholders in each group. We're working on legislative changes. We've analyzed the situation. We've identified the gaps. So now there is a discussion ongoing where what can we actually introduce into Georgian system in a medium to long term in terms of legislation and in terms of implementation and implementing systems. So we're hoping that it will be successful. And
wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Indeed, we see that a lot is going on in Georgia in terms of reforms, and thank you for sharing your long journey and also the complexity of the issues. And I like very much that you point out also to the life circle approach, because when we talk about family-friendly policies, it's not only a standalone issue, right? We really need to look multidimensional from the early childhood into the elderly. So thank you for bringing this issue as well. And I also like the lesson learned that you shared with everyone about social dialogue and involvement of stakeholders from the very beginning of development of the policies, and having everyone on board when you do such big of legal changes and policy reforms. So thank you so much for bringing Georgia experience to this room, and I see the level of knowledge is growing and growing the more we go. Thank you very much. So now moving to and landing to Albania, as well, a very beautiful country, and I'm pleased to talk to Denada Seferi, the Deputy Minister of Health and Social Protection of Albania. We know also that in recent years, the Albanian government has done also a lot to improve its legal framework to support women and men to balance their work and life responsibilities. And there was already several EU directives that have been transported into national legislation, especially on rights of pregnant workers, as well as maternity, paternity, and parental leave. And having these policies in place, of course, it's a very big and huge step to support women and families. But the implementation, as we also heard from Georgia and other countries, and monitoring of these policies is crucial to ensure that this actually leads to the desired results around gender equality and demographic resilience. But it's not always straightforward process, right? Especially that as many of these policies have a direct impact, on budgets, on private sector. So we'd like to learn more from Albania, how the government of Albania has been ensuring the implementation of gender-responsive family policies, including the budgeting. Because when it comes to budget, and I liked very much this morning saying that it's not about spending, it's about investing. But still, even the investment sometimes is a big elephant in the room when it's come to money, right, to support policies. So how do you deal this in Albania? We'll be very much looking forward to hear the Albanian experience. Over to you.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you very much to be here with the panelists and your honorable participants to share experiences about Albania. And thank you to UNFPA that is doing possible that all the regions are here and to share experiences about all the social policies that are involved to the family policies. It is high time to have this focus given the crucial role that family plays in gender education and also in a cultural one. So it is very important that in Albania, gender-related policies are as the priorities of the government of Albania. And also, in Albania, the Ministry of Health and Social Protection is the institution that ensures that gender policies are implemented both at central and local. So, level and development strategies are gender aligned. Every strategy that it is in Albania, it is gender aligned, and of course it is in line with Agenda 2030 with EU requirements, SDG forecast and indicators, and also it is in line with the legal framework to EU acquis. So it is very important that we just have the strategies in Albania, but just aligned with the Agenda of 2030. One of our main progress is that it is worth sharing with you that gender resource budgeting in Albania is obligatory by law for public institutions. And this is monitored closely by our ministry, so Ministry of Health and Social Protection, and other institutions, including external sources. This is also reported periodically. And as a country that, as evidence shows, we have low fertility and reproductive age group leading to aging population. So in order to address these issues, we are working as a government to improve these demographic challenges. And our strategies that we have a long list of strategies, like strategy of social care and social protection, strategy on social inclusion, a strategy on health coverage universal. We have the primary health strategy. We have also the gender equality strategy that it is 2022-2030. And also employment strategy that it is under revising, and youth strategy. All of them are budgeting, and all of them have huge activity on and plan action plans that are just aligned with budgeting. Of course, allow me to mention that Albania, it is almost very near to all the programs that Georgia has just mentioned. And when it comes to social protection, we are reforming 3 pillars that are part and involving family policies. It is a social protection scheme with social economic assistance. We have a new reform on evaluation of the system for disability people, and also we have social care reform that have two main priorities as deinstitutionalization and also decentralization of social services. And when it comes to strategy and to all of these programs, we have the new approach of life cycle. And it is very important to have to mention that we have in place till the programs for the social assistance for child, for families, and for elderly people. Allow me to tell you that now, today in Albania, we just approved the second package of social second package for to afford the crisis in Ukraine and the prices for family in need and for vulnerable groups. They are the one of the main categories that it is included in this package. It is not only family in need that we have increased 10% of the allowances, but the single mothers that are households and part of the scheme of social assistance has doubled the amount of money that they have just as allowances. Also, the elderly people that are part of the scheme of social assistance have doubled the allowances for each one that they are single or are part of the family in need. Also, the second reform, it was in social housing and in education for scholarship for young people and for children, and also for those that are most vulnerable. Home care assistance for elderly people, it is now the new approach and the new program that on the reform of social care we are almost going ahead with the new program, but also with the new social fund. And it is a budgeting that we just have for third years that we are just increasing. And the social fund has in their priorities to establish new community centers for children, for families, and for vulnerable groups. Till now, that are at the third year of implementation of the social fund, we have 40 social services, 40 centers with multidisciplinary services for families in need, for categories in need, and also for children and elderly people. So these are some of our main priorities, and included in this social fund, there are some counseling line for children, abused children, and for women abused and violation also. We are in work in progress because at December 2021 we just established the new order of social worker, and now they are part of all of the services at local and at central level. And till now we have employed 700 of them that are psychologists, also social workers, that are working in community centers established by social fund. So we need to have resilience, but we need to have also sustainability for all the services or for all the community services that we are established. And part of this joint program, it is also the municipality that are budgeting social plans, and also part of the budgeting of establishment of these centers are municipality budgeting also. So as we have at the first year, 90% of the funds provided by central government, 10% are part of them. And in the other coming years, 60% it is part of central government and 40% it is part of local government. And also in the in coming years because of the sustainability of the centers, because we learn lessons that we give when we give money, and all the money are part of the central government, then the local government, it is not more responsibility to have funds on their own. So this is very important, to join programs and to have sustainability for all the programs that we are going to improve in the territory. Also, the institutionalization is a good process that we are working on with UNICEF, with all the UN organization, and we are in progress. We are involving also the children with disabilities and development centers, and it is very important to say that part of them, and 40% of the children now are in their families, but we are not working only with children at the institution, but we are working with their families. And these are inclusive policies that address families and not only children, or not only one member of the family. Having said them, allow me to say that we have partnerships also with the private sector, as a social dialogue, as a social counseling that we just have at a central level, but also we involve them in consultation process for every strategy, for every law that we need to approve, and for every legal reform that we have in country. And coming back to gender resource budgeting should aim at introducing this legal obligation to the private sector to support the gender-responsive family policies. Our Social Insurance Institute is a strong partner and also advocated for the benefit of the improved paternity leaves, and why not for us to look into this and to be longer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was very, very interesting and rich presentation, and I was impressed by the list of the policies and strategies that you have, and you strongly said that they are all of them are budgeted. So I think this is a very good line between development of policies and their implementation. And it was also very interesting to hear about the way the budgeting is going through the national and local public authorities also, because it really reinforced the accountability at local level. Thank you so much. I think it was so interesting and rich conversation, and I myself have even more questions, and I'm sure the audience have also a lot of questions, but since we are approaching also the lunchtime, there'll be a very good chance to interact with other countries. So I'd like to thank you very much again for your presentations, for sharing your experience, your wisdom, your commitments also, and we wish you a very good luck with the reforms, with the implementation of these policies for the benefit of women and men of our countries and our region. Thank you very much.